Well, folks, this is turning out to be a hell of a week. I was going to address today the situation regarding Kamala's latest insane apocalyptic economic policy after she just unveiled her proposal for price controls. It's funny, she hasn't had any policies in quite a while, and I guess now that the DNC is happening, they decided, hey, we need her to start proposing things that are concrete, and everything that they're coming out with is just like it's nonsense. There's no other way to put it. And so if you thought price controls were bad, if you thought bread lines were bad, boy, have I got a doozy for you. Unrealized capital gains tax. A proposal straight out of imagination land, or Stalin's Russia, whichever you prefer, because it is a tax based purely on imagination. It is based on the perceived value of your assets going up while you hang on to them. Now, there are problems with this on multiple levels. The most basic one being that you are taxing people for something that is completely out of their control. You're taxing people for something that is... You're taxing them based on the actions of other people. Because the supposed market value of your assets is not something that you have any power over. Normally, people are taxed for something that they do. We put taxes on behavior. And of course, the old adage, if you tax something, you get less of it. This applies because typically taxes are levied against things, against choices that people make. The classic example would be like vice taxes. They levy a heavy tax on cigarettes. Now people who want to smoke have to pay this heavy tax. And then what ends up happening in a couple of generations, almost nobody smokes anymore. You put heavy taxes on income. As people make more money, they have less incentive to work and actually earn money because they're keeping less and less of that money. To the point where you have people, at the very low end of the income spectrum who aren't making very much money, but also don't have to pay any income tax, and as a result can reach a sort of equilibrium where they don't really feel incentivized to work any harder because they're able to get by on what they're making, and they're not having to pay any money at the end of the year to Uncle Sam. Now, this unrealized capital gains tax, if it were to be compared to anything that we currently have in America, you would compare it to a property tax, which we don't have at the federal level because such a thing is unconstitutional, and I'll get to that in a minute. But at the local level in states, in counties and things, you have property taxes. So let's say you own a home. There's a county property appraiser. The property appraiser assesses a value of your property that you own, your real estate, whether it's land, a house, a farm, or something. And then they levy a tax on that every year. However, because real estate values, because property values are volatile, your property taxes can't change very much year to year, because obviously if your property was reassessed and you had to pay a different level of taxation every single year, you would be punishing people for living in neighborhoods where property values are going up, which is something that is completely out of their control. You have, let's say an elderly couple that has lived in one neighborhood, and they bought a house, when they were 22, and they got married and they bought a house, because it was the 1950s and people could do stuff like that. And they've lived in this neighborhood ever since. And now they're in their 80s. They're living off of Social Security. But a bunch of rich millennials have decided that their neighborhood is now trendy. And so they've moved in there and they've driven up the property prices. And now these old folks, their little two-bedroom house is worth $800,000 supposedly on the open market. But they have an income between the two of them of like $30K a year or something. They're on a fixed income. If you were to try and tax them based on value of their home of $800,000, they would be homeless. They would have to sell their house and they'd have nowhere to go. They would be forced out of their neighborhood. And so, thankfully, in most places, the property taxes are structured in a way to where that is less likely to happen. It still does happen. Happened to my grandmother. After living in the same house, let me think, when did she move into that house? I think it would have been in the 70s. The neighborhood that she lived in, property values appreciated significantly over the time that she lived there. And by the late 90s, the property taxes were untenable, and so she had to move to a condo. But most of the time, the way that property taxes are structured, it is meant to avoid that happening. The point of a property tax is not to try and get people to have to sell their homes and to amplify the process of gentrification. And I've gone on way too long on that subject because this is supposed to be on Kamala Harris's new unrealized capital gains tax. But it's important that you understand the context of how property taxes work in America, at least in my experience. Maybe there are different parts of the country where my characterization would be considered less accurate. If so, sorry, but I haven't studied the property tax structure in all 50 states. But anyway, Kamala's new unrealized capital gains tax is quite different because it overtly is trying to punish people for owning assets that appreciate in value. It is taxing people specifically because there was a change in value. It's not taxing people based on holding an asset. It is taxing people based on the appreciation. It is designed to punish you for the price of your asset rising. And so in the case of a home, what that means, let's say you live in Florida, where I live, and in certain areas, housing prices have increased. I've seen up to 500%, or no, not 500%. I'd say 400%. They've quintupled, so I think that would be 400%. Yeah. Over the last, let's say, when was the bottom? 2012-ish, maybe 2014. So 10 to 12 years, let's say the last decade, the value of your home has gone up 400%. It's gone from $100,000 when you bought it, at the bottom of the market back in 2014, let's say, and now it's worth $500,000. For every dollar that the value of that asset has increased, you would have been, under this new regime, forced to pay 25 cents to the federal government every year in taxes. And so cumulatively, over this entire period, from the bottom up to the peak where we are now, from the time that you bought your home in 2014 for $100,000 to the present when it is worth $500,000, you would have paid $100,000 in unrealized capital gains taxes. And so that would have doubled the price of your home. You thought in 2014, oh, I'm doing good. I'm buying a house for $100,000. This is a good deal for me. Well, by 2024, you will have actually paid not including upkeep, not including your other property taxes, not including your utility bills and other expenses. You will have paid in addition to the principal, not including interest on your loan, none of that. In addition to the principal, $100,000 price tag, you will have paid an additional $100,000 in unrealized capital gains tax. That's what this means. That's how the tax works. Now, yes, under the current proposal, they're making it just like income tax was back under Woodrow Wilson. They're saying, well, no, we're only going to apply this tax to the ultra wealthy. You know, it's like, oh, okay, sure. I know how that game works. 5 years from now, this tax will be applied to everyone and everything. And so the incentive will be to not hold assets that appreciate in any way. You'll want to live somewhere where prices are very stable. And once upon a time, that wouldn't have been so hard, because after all, throughout the entirety of the 20th century, housing prices didn't appreciate at all nationally. Sure, certain areas may have experienced booms or whatever, but overall, housing prices stayed the same. And so you wouldn't have really suffered at all like you would in modern America from under a tax regime such as this, even though it is still incredibly dystopian. But nowadays, the government has a policy of driving up housing prices. The government has a goal of creating this instability in prices, trying to rapidly make housing appreciate, which makes it unaffordable for large swaths of the population if they're unable to keep up and increase their levels of income at the same rate. For example, let's say back in 2014, you were the one buying the $100,000 house. Unless your income has also increased by 400% in the last 10 years, you would be unable today to buy your own home if you had to go and buy another house. Let's say, God forbid, you were in a divorce and your spouse got the house in the divorce, and your income is the same that it was in 2014 when you bought the house. You would be unable to move anywhere. Or maybe you could live in Section 8 housing or something like that. You could live in the projects, but you wouldn't be able to go out and buy another house like the one that you had. And so if you're already, sort of at the lower end of the housing spectrum, if you're already living, in the cheapest, neighborhood around, you're just going to end up homeless because there's nothing cheaper for you to afford. You're unable to afford the place that you are in, but there's nowhere cheaper to go. And you might be saying at this point, well, what does that matter to me? I'm not getting a divorce. I'm happy in my house. And that might be the case. But you know who's not happy with you in your house? Kamala Harris. She wants to drive you out of your house. She wants to accelerate the gentrification of your neighborhood. And so, unless you are able to pay that 25% unrealized capital gains tax every year as your house increases in value, you will be forced to sell your house anyway, lest it be taken from you by the federal government as compensation for your back taxes. And so you don't want to own a house that is appreciating, or else you will be forced to sell it. Because at a certain point, it's going to appreciate so much, you're just not going to have the cash on hand, especially living paycheck to paycheck, to pay the unrealized capital gains tax. And that's why this is perhaps the most dastardly tax ever conceived in America. It is worse than the income tax. Because the income tax Sure, it steals your productivity, but it's stolen from you before it ever really makes it into your hands. It's taken out, it's withheld by your employer. And so at least after that, at that point, you know, hey, anything that I get, anything that I use, that I spend this money on, at least I know that's mine. At least I know that belongs to me. But that will no longer be the case. They will take what's yours. And they'll laugh about it. She'll cackle about it. Oh, and about the matter of the Constitution, I believe this is unconstitutional because I don't see how this wouldn't be considered a direct tax. Although, you know, they rewrote with the income tax. They basically they did. They amended the Constitution to make the income tax legal because the income tax also would have been unconstitutional. But I'm pretty sure that amendment is only an exception for the income tax itself. I don't think unrealized capital gains could fall under that because it's just not income. So maybe that's how they'd have to do it. They would have to try and define this as income. And, you know, the Supreme Court, I don't know. You never know with them. They could just as easily say, yeah, okay, we're going to rubber stamp that. Who cares? Yeah, it's a direct tax. You can't have federal property taxes, but you know, we the Supreme Court love taxes, so we're gonna say this is okay. Who knows? So I won't delve any deeper into it than that because we all know the Constitution doesn't matter anyway. The law doesn't matter. They can arrest you for whatever they want. They can tax you for whatever they want. They can drop their drawers and tell you to kiss it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And people wonder why self-immolation is coming back into style. Anyway, with that said, I'll see you folks back here in the next one.